All right, we will call to order the Rocky Hill Board of Education Budget Workshop, Tuesday, January 24th, 6:30, Town Hall Council Chambers. If everyone can please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I see that we have our full complement of administrative staff here tonight. So thank you for coming, everyone. We will try to go as quickly and efficiently as possible and not keep everyone here all night. Mr. Maziarz, I think, is taking the bets on the side for tonight. So everyone's locked in and we're good to go, huh? With that being said, we'll do our traditional format. Dr. Zito will open tonight with a presentation. Then we will begin to proceed through the budget book section by section. I'm hoping to take maybe a break at approximately 8 o'clock. We can take a 5 or 10 minute break and then continue on. We'll try to get as far as we can tonight and as efficiently as possible. I know that some board members also submitted some questions. And Dr. Zito has prepared responses to, I believe, either all or most of those questions that were submitted. And he will also hand that out to the board and briefly summarize those responses as well. And on one final note, I would be remiss if I did not recognize a former board member who's here in the crowd today, Miss Lori Bosky. So good of you to see us. I guess your Tuesday night social calendar was completely empty, huh? So you're here. Well, it's so wonderful to see you. Thank you for coming. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Zito and his team to start the budget presentation. Nice. Ooh. Nice.
All right, I appreciate everybody coming this evening. Board of Education, I have to commend Chuck Zettergren for the work he does with his staff to really dig into the details of the budget. This is probably the most important task you have besides hiring the superintendent and developing policy. Budget really ranks right up there at the top of the things that you do as a board under state statute. So this year we're coming in at about $52 million. It's a 4.79% increase on the operating budget from last year. Just to put that in perspective, a year ago, I stood in front of you with fewer challenges that we were facing, and our proposal was 4.49. So we come in really with a message of this is what we think we need to run the school district efficiently. We're happy to answer any questions once we work through these initial series of slides. I just want to kind of set the framework that I'll get into some unique challenges we're facing. And you'll see that we did a lot of work to get to this number of 4.79. Last year's actual adopted budget at the end of the process was a little under $50 million. You see that figure on there, 49.7 million. So we break it down in large groups with budget object summaries. And again, you'll see, as is typical in any year, we're at about 83% of the costs are related to the personnel. About 2/3 of the budget directly goes to salaries, 16% to benefits. You see the other drivers in the budget. Transportation's always a significant line item, equipment and so forth, and you can see how we total out at the 52 million on this chart. Different way of looking at those data, different graphic presentation. Again, the salaries really jump out. That's 2/3 of the overall expense. The benefits are the second biggest portion, and as I say every year, education is a people-intensive industry, and you wouldn't expect anything different in most districts. The personnel costs range usually from 80 to 85% of the overall budget. We take that 4.79 and we break it down. Again, salaries and benefits is driving most of that number, independent of the other costs. We'd be at 3.52%, and you can see the other drivers on the budget, which get us up to 4.79. Enrollment has leveled out. I've been here 11 years. There were many years I was coming in here talking about significant increases. Based on our NESDAQ October 1 report, we're up 11 kids total from a year ago. Very stable for a district this size, although there are some factors of transients I'll talk about later on in the presentation. The overall number has been very, very stable for the last couple of years. So earlier I mentioned some of the unique challenges we're facing. So if you look at this development budget process, we are facing the expiration of the COVID-19 federal funding. Every school district in the country received money from the federal government as a result of the COVID situation. Those funds are expiring. So that essentially creates a fiscal cliff. I think 2 years ago, Ms. Bosky was asking me questions about this cliff, so we're going to get to the answer tonight, 2 years down the road.
That's what you think.
Projected spikes in costs for utilities. We've seen the economic impact of the natural gas and electric costs going up. We see that here in the budget, just like I see it in my home heating bills this winter. And you probably all have experienced the same thing. So on a bigger scale, the school district's facing that challenge. Those spikes alone are roughly $200,000. To put that in perspective, that's about 0.4 on a budget, which is significant. Also, fuel costs. We use, one of the questions I appreciate, Ms. Manella gets the homework star from the teacher here tonight because she sent in the most questions. She had a question about fuel costs. New Britain Transportation uses gasoline-powered buses. We're up about $79,000 on the fuel just for the gasoline for those buses. Again, fairly significant. And we also have, and we're continuing to see, despite the stable enrollment, significant growth in special education students identified with an IEP. So I'll go over those numbers as well because that's another driver. And although the overall picture has remained stable, we've seen a 68% increase in the last 10 years in the number of special ed kids. And I'll get into that a little bit later in the presentation. So let's talk a little bit about the COVID money. This is federal money that's expiring on June 30th. We are losing $685,000 currently assisting the district. That goes off that cliff on June 30th. In this budget, we've determined that we'd like to keep about $580,000 of that money in retained staffing. So we don't get to keep the dollars. We have to figure out how we're going to keep those folks employed. Significantly skewed a little bit towards special ed, also some IT support, some clerical support as the needs have grown. One of the things, just to kind of sidetrack briefly to clerical, with COVID-19, there are new protocols we have to follow that we didn't follow several years ago. For example, later on in the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about the athletic department. The return to play protocols have created significant amounts of paperwork in that department that we didn't have before COVID. So you'll see some adjustments in clerical as well. In order to deal with that, we've also recommended some offsets. So in this initial presentation, we've removed one building sub from each of the schools. We've made some consolidations in clerical staffing, and we do anticipate some retirements this year. And based on enrollments, I'm very confident we can do some consolidation through attrition for 2 positions, which helps us do some offsets so that the cliff isn't so severe. And basically, to summarize this slide, if this was a typical year and we weren't dealing with a fiscal cliff and those spikes in utilities and fuels, but I was still making what I call some tightening adjustments to bring the number down, we'd probably be at about a 3.2%. I just want to kind of put that in perspective, that those challenges are driving us up closer to the high 4s. So the special education enrollment, I mentioned it briefly. Special education includes teachers and related service staff. So your social workers, school psychologists, speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, BCBA, you see that term, board certified behavioral analyst. Those are folks that all work with kids with unique needs as identified in their individual education plans. You could see those numbers. 10 years ago, it was actually my first year in the district, October of 2012, 231 kids were identified. We're at 388. And the enrollment has not gone up overall, but the numbers of identified kids have gone up. We've seen a lot of kids moving in. I think some of it is the quality of the programming, quite frankly, that we offer. So you'll see that that's an impact. If you look at October 1, 2021 to last fall, October of 2022, that's a 30 student increase. That's significant. And the staffing simply has not matched the growth. So when we looked at the COVID dollars expiring, we knew that we needed to spend some of that funding on life skills at the high school, another Bright Beginnings position at Stevens School, occupational therapist and so forth. Those are ESSER-funded positions currently. We had to figure out a way to keep them in the district to keep serving those kids. In the middle bullet there too, the other note we have on there is that those numbers are kids who are identified. They do not reflect students in the referral process. So there's probably another 32 to 34 kids right now as we speak that are in the referral process. That means they're not identified as special needs students, but we've seen issues that might need to be addressed, or parents have contacted us with concerns about their children. And those kids require testing, evaluations, levels of intervention. So those are actually additional students that create additional work for the special needs staff. Enrollment, again, we're very stable. 11 student increase. It's a very manageable number for a district our size. As of October 1, another 28 kids reported to us that they were homeschooling. Parents reported that to us. But we're still a district with a high rate of transiency, and I always talk about this a little bit, and I'd like you to see these numbers. So for the 21-22 school year, every year in a typical school district, we get our kindergarten registrations, usually around 200, and we have our senior class leave, and in Rocky Hill, you can almost bet the house that it's going to be 170 to 200 kids in any given graduating cohort. So we know we're getting the kindergarten kids, and we know we're losing the seniors. But last year, we had 312 kids in grades 1 through 12 that came into the district. That's a huge number, but the overall enrollment didn't go up. So that means there's just about as many kids leaving. It's almost a one-for-one swap. To date, right now, we've had 241 kids entering the district, exclusive of those kindergarten kids. I'm not counting those kids. And we're only in January. So we still see a lot of in-migration, but we see almost an identical corresponding out-migration. But it does create additional pressure. If you're teaching fourth grade at Mosier School, you may start the year with 20 faces in your classroom, and by the end of the year, you may have 14 of those kids and 6 new faces and 6 kids who left. And we don't see that in every school district in this area, but we see quite a bit of it here. In terms of the overall projections, we are projected to have a decrease of 25 kids over the next 3 years. That's an average of a little over 8 students. Again, that's very reflective of the stability we've achieved right now with the enrollment. And if you remember, for years, we were spiking significantly. So we've leveled off. So let's look at the staffing changes on this slide here. A lot of these are positions we put into the budget that were previously grant funded by the COVID relief grants. That means they did not impact the operating budget. So the instructional technology district-wide position, we'd like to keep that. That was previously grant funded. 2 special ed teachers, I mentioned them previously, a life skills teacher. At the high school, we have roughly 20 kids in a life skills program. that we initially, when we redesigned that high school, we were projecting 10 students in that class with one teacher. We've now expanded into another room and hired another teacher. We have 20 kids in a program initially conceived to serve 10 students. Building IT support is a position we were able to fund through COVID that we'd like to keep. We added some paras, primarily paraeducators, because kids moved in with IEPs requiring paraeducator services. We have a central office secretary that we had eliminated when we opened Mosier. We really need that position. This person supports Darlene's office and the 2 other administrators assigned to Darlene, and we'd like to keep that position there. OT services, we are using the last bit of the ESSER money to hire an additional occupational therapist. We're in the interview process right now. The reason for that is the caseloads have grown dramatically, as I mentioned earlier. So when those funds expire at the end of the year, we want to keep that person because we want to be able to service all the kids that have the OT needs. As I mentioned earlier, we anticipate that we can consolidate 2 teaching positions through retirement, attrition. When we get into the global tab, you'll see that that savings is $150,000 because the global tab is specific to salaries. The $200,000 is reflective in the overall budget. That includes the health insurance for those positions. A consolidation of a half a secretarial position. And then, as I said earlier, we have a number of permanent building subs assigned to each school. A lot of that was driven by COVID. They're very helpful. They're very useful. We still see a fair amount of teacher absenteeism, as you would see in any school district. But, in terms of making decisions and prioritizing things, we think we can reduce one of those subs in each building. And that brings us back down to a 4.79 budget. So again, to recap the factors driving the budget increase, you see them there. Salaries, benefits, services, tuition, and the supplies, including the utilities, are up significantly. These next few slides, we'll get into more detail in the global tabs. But you can see we break down just the salaries alone. The increase is about $1.2 million. Good chunk of that, the first 2 items under certified salaries, are driven by the teacher's contract, step increase, and the wage increase. They're almost identical, roughing out at about 3%. There are some, you'll always see those admin degree staffing changes. There's some adjustments, people coming in with less experience, retiring people with higher levels of experience. So we're able to make some adjustments there. And then some of the ESSER grant positions. As we work through the entire salary account, including the non-certifieds, the paraeducators and so forth, you see that the overall increase just on salaries is about $1.2 million. Benefits. Had a question from a board member about that. Right now, the market trend in the state is calling for a 12 to 14% increase in health insurance. We've come in conservatively at 5.8%. So we're pretty happy with the carrier we have, Cigna. We think that's a very reasonable number compared to what's going on in a lot of places. We're coming in conservatively, but it's still a 5.8% increase. So that's $388,000 just on the health insurance. And you see increases on the other benefit accounts, pensions, payroll taxes, and so forth. Those are relatively minor increases, but the big driver on health insurance is the account with Cigna. And again, 5.8 is a very reasonable number. Professional services, again, consistent with the increase in special education students. We have some needs that need to be met. I'll jump to one of them here. We need to increase the amount of time with the BCBA. We contract for some of those services right now. The amount of time we're contracting for is not enough to meet the needs. So again, it's consistent with the enrollment increases in that specific lane of students. Tuition is also going up. We have kids that are outplaced in both public and private settings. It's a cost of doing business. We have some new students that have come into the district and so forth. Magnet schools have increased their tuition by 5%. So the overall tuition cost is going up about $150,000. Supplies, we worked hard to try to keep this tight. The big driver here, under the overall heading of supplies, are the gasoline and utilities. That's 200,000 of the 238. Everything else we kept pretty tight. But if you look at those rates that's natural gas 75,000 and the electric 125,000. $200,000 increase right there. We really don't have any control over that. All right, now the academic portion. You have a lot of material in your book. And we went through these slides, Ms. Listro, a couple meetings ago when we did the academic report. So I'm going to buzz through these. But what we did, again, is we want to see in a budget presentation, where do we rank in spending? Of the 24 communities in Durg D, we're 17th in spending. You see the per pupil allocation reflected there. Where are we on the pandemic recovery? This is a new metric. State wanted to see what was the impact of COVID-19, what was the impact in places that kept their kids home. Some towns in Connecticut kept kids out of school for over a year. What was the impact in places that opened their doors in the fall of 2020 for all students? I commend the board for that decision here in Rocky Hill. We are number one. So we lost very little ground in mathematics. We outranked every other district in our district reference group. Same story with English language arts. And I attribute that success to the board's direct decision. Despite pressure, despite what was going on in other towns and other states, this board opened schools in the fall of 2020 for all students. And that allowed students to keep coming to school every day and learning. And we've seen the impact that the pandemic has had nationally. We also compared ourselves to the wealthier towns on this metric. So we look at Durg B. So that's Greenwich, Madison, Fairfield, but some of the wealthier towns in central Connecticut too. Glastonbury, Avon, Simsbury, Farmington. Here we are again. 18th in spending if you put us in Durg B. Where are we on math? Third in Durg B. Pretty good. Woodbridge has 460 kids. I don't know what they're doing better than us, but we're third in Durg B. If we put ourselves into that division, it would be like being relegated up in the Premier Soccer League. You look at ELA, same story. Third against the Durg B towns. We're outranking South Windsor, Farmington, Simsbury, Granby. We're outranking Glastonbury, all these towns in Durg B. Their kids lost more ground than ours did. And I really think a lot of it is because we kept our schools open. A lot of those other districts were on hybrid plans. 2 weeks in, 2 weeks out, very disjointed for kids. We even said, how would we fare against Durg A? We knew we'd be last in spending. These are the wealthiest towns in the state: Reading, Weston, Westport. So we're way under them in spending. We'd have to come up $5,000 per child to equal them. How did we compare on this learning metric? Pretty competitive. Third in math. Second in ELA. It's pretty good against Durg A. So we're pleased with those results. And even our performance index, if you look at this slide, we're right in there with them. 76.5, very competitive. Ahead of some of these districts. And in terms of losing ground, we're ahead of everybody except for one. So now we get to the traditional measures. Looking at the Durg D, Smarter Balanced Math, you're used to these slides. Number 2 in the Durg. In math, Stonington beat us a little bit. Number 2 in ELA. This is Smarter Balanced, grades 3 through 8. Math, SAT. Durg D against our own economic group. Second, again in the Durg, to East Lyme on the math, SAT. Second on the literacy portion of the SAT. So very strong results again. And we're really proud of the effort of the teachers and the kids who work really hard to do do what they do on these exams. Where are we on special ed expenditures? We are the most efficient district in the DERG. We spend 19.38% of our overall budget. Transportation constitutes about 3% of our budget. So we really, I want to commend Ms. Stevenson for the work she does with the programming. A lot of this is driven by in-district programming. We have very few kids we outplace. It's very expensive to outplace kids. And the creative programming that we have going on here in Rocky Hill allows us to keep these costs under control. So, what if we just did an exercise and we spent what the average district in the state spends on education? We come in at about 7 million higher than we are. It's a lot of money. And if we just went to the DERG-D average, 3.2 million. So the bottom line is taxpayers are getting a great result on their investment. Our scores are way above average, and we do it at a below average cost. So when we look at where we rank economically in the state, we're spending 125. We're number 125 out of 166. So we're in the bottom 25% of spending. But in terms of the town's ability to pay, we're in the top 45% of wealth. So I'm a conservative person fiscally. I'm not requesting more than we need. I take pride in the fact that we're able to run a very efficient operation and get great results, and you should take pride in that as well. We're not frivolously spending money. But on the other hand, we feel like when we come in with these types of proposals, we want to work with you on getting as efficient as possible, but we think it's very reasonable, particularly given the challenges we face this year. So that's the overall presentation. Happy to take any questions on that. And then I think we're going to dive into the book.
You got it. Do we want to put that up first, or? Okay. All right. Any questions on the slide presentation from Dr. Zito first? To my left, any questions?
Said one. How many non-special ed students do we have outside that we're paying tuition for?
We have a slide on that, the magnet school kids.
Yeah.
I don't have that number on the top of my head. We can get to that to you. He's asking about non-special ed kids, so like magnet school students?
Yeah.
It's in the book, Mr.
In the book under transportation and magnet.
We'll get you the answer.
Section 12.
So right now, we have about 95 students involved in various magnet schools.
Any additional questions on the slides? Ms. Tucker?
I have one other question. The reduction of the building subs, so
Yep.
it's one sub per school, it's being reduced. How many subs does that leave per school?
So I think it leaves 4 at the high school and 3 at the other schools.
Oh, thank you.
Any additional questions on the slides to my right?
Only one more.
Huh.
The gas bill. Do we do like a set thing, or is it variable going forward?
Gas, as far as heating,
Yeah. Like, do we do one of those like level pay systems, or do we just pay the gas bill?
No, the town pays the going rate. It's actually,
no, we pay.
we're paying, okay, I'm sorry, my apology.
It's natural gas.
But we don't lock into your question.
Correct. All right. Well,
Look at that in the top.
yeah,
Oh, that's a camera.
don't look at it now. I've
Okay.
had many people tell me where natural gas is going, and it's not going up.
All right, with any additional questions to my right? Okay, all right. I just want to close this by saying, Dr. Zito, to you and your staff and your team, I think the slide presentation is excellent. It shows and demonstrates the value that the taxpayers of Rocky Hill are getting through the board's budget, and also the incredible results that we're getting for students on all levels here, all grade levels, elementary, high school, special education. So I think there's a lot of great information here, and I think it's kudos to you and your team for all of your efforts for the achievements that we're getting here in Rocky Hill. So thank you for that. Okay, let's get started here. We're going to open up to the first budget tab, and we're going to start with the global budget presentation. Are you going to lead us through, Dr. Zito, or defer to Chuck?
Usually we let Chuck take the microphone for this.
All right, Chuck, it's your show. All right.
All right, some
some of this, is this on? Okay, yeah. Some of this information will be redundant in that, the slides covered a nice, gave a nice picture of where the costs are going up, and that's what the global tab attempts to do as well. But we'll go through them, and then sometimes you'll see something a little bit different, and you can ask any questions you may have. So the first slide is, again, the pictorial of a pie chart, just depicting where the major increases are, and those are salaries and benefits, and then transportation is another line item as well that's, a good hunk of the budget. And then the next tab or slide is the budget drivers, and again, that's depicting the salaries and benefits, professional services, tuition, supplies, and I just want to notate, I think it was brought up in the slides as well, but the gas and electricity are included in supplies from an accounting standpoint. So it's not just the supplies that our students are utilizing. And then we'll get into the line items that have the major increases, and the first one being the certified salaries. And that first box depicts the teacher's step increase of 1.48%, the gross wage increase of 1.5, a little under 3% total. And then the next line just depicts other administrative wage increases. We do have degree changes that staff are entitled to as they move from, say, a master's to a 6-year degree, or a bachelor's to a master's, and things of that nature. And then we have when, a staff possibly leaves the district and a rehire, that in a lot of cases results in a savings for the district. So the net effect of those changes are a decrease of $87,560. And then, as Dr. Zito had mentioned in his slides, we are requesting positions that were previously funded through the ESSER grant, and that's the instructional technology position, 2 special ed positions, and we did the teacher retirements that we are anticipating not filling through attrition, resulting in a net decrease of 150. So the net increase in the certified salary line item is $717,652.
What we'll do, Chuck, is we'll go by the page, and then I'll look right and left for questions. So we'll tackle all 3 objects, and then we'll go
Okay.
to questions.
All right. The next non-certified salary line item, Object 112. That has a total increase of $474,659. Again, we had contractual budgeted salary increases for the various bargaining groups within that line item of $187,82. We did have added staffing in the 22-23 school year that weren't budgeted, that we have to, again, carry forward in this budget of $140,701. We did add the OT position for $70,000 from a budget standpoint, and then the IT tech support and secretary for athletics that were previously in the ESSER grant funds for $51,908 and $31,268, for a total overall increase in the non-certified salary of $474,659. The next salary account is the paraprofessionals or paraeducators, as we now call them. That has a total overall increase of $227,719. Again, we had some paraeducators that we hired during the 22-23 school year based on student needs of $83,341. Contractual budgeted salary increases of $50,070. And ESSER grant-funded positions of 2.65 paraeducators, $88,308. And then we do have some mandated training that we are required to give to the paraeducators, and we carried $6,000 for that, for a total of $227,719.
All right, any questions from any board members on objects 111 through 113? All right? Oh, to my left, any questions? All right, you can turn the page.
Next, we get into the other major increase on an overall basis, and that's the benefits. The first one being the health insurance line item. And as Dr. Zito had mentioned, that's showing an overall increase of 5.8%. We are budgeting for a rate increase of 11.5%, but, excuse me, we're anticipating through some of the staffing changes that, a lot of the newer teachers end up staying on their parents' health insurance until they are able to jump on ours. So we have netted that into our budget figure, and that's resulting in the 5.8% increase. The pension non-certified, that's basically for our non-certified staff. A lot of that in the paraeducator line item when we have turnover, when some of the people who have been here for a while leave and we hire new people. We have the old town pension plan that was a defined benefit versus now it's a defined, what we call a defined contribution. So it used to be under the defined benefit scenario, the town would kick in all costs associated with the pension. And now with the new, it's been a while, but now with the new defined contribution plan, the board ends up picking up that cost. So when the transition happens, it adds to that line item. And that's what's reflected here, $23,702. Then we have tuition reimbursement. That's showing an overall increase of $17,500. This year, per the teacher's contract, the amount that the board is obligated to, based on that contract, is going up by $5,000. And then we have some other additional administrators and some other staff that are enrolled in classes, and that's making up the other $12,500, for a total of $17,500.
All right, to my left, any questions on objects 210, 235, or 240? No. To my right, any questions? Oh, Ms. Manella.
I have a question regarding line 210, which is the employee benefits group medical. Chuck, have you looked into, I know that Jess had mentioned earlier about state insurance. Have you guys looked into that for additional savings?
Yeah, we have looked into that, and what we found is our rates are very competitive with the state plan, and there's been some, like a lot of groups, there's been some volatility there, and other districts that are in that plan, a couple times they would come out with estimates, and then the estimates would vary quite a bit, but it was after districts had passed their budget. So there's been some communication issues. There's also, when you do get into the plan, you have to negotiate with all your unions. So you may end up with some of your unions opting to go in and others not. So there's some complications with going into the state plan. And if you wish to get out, that's another hurdle you have to go through. So there's just some different variations that, at this point in time, like I said, our rates are very competitive with what those rates are for the Connecticut plan, so we opt right now not to get into that plan.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, to my left one more time, any additional questions? My right, any additional questions? Okay, turn the page.
The pupil services and professional services accounts, pupil services is showing an increase of $87,778. $37,078 is an increase in regards to for our special needs students. We've also included $50,000 for contractual services for a BCBA, and then we have the athletic other student services going up by $700. So in this account are things such as evaluations for students, and Amy could describe these in more detail, but also for services, when we have some students that go to magnet schools and require special ed services, those types of contractual services are included in here as well. Under professional services, we see an overall increase of $11,759. We have included $6,500. We do have the teacher negotiations that will be coming up this fall, where we typically utilize attorneys. The athletic trainer, we have had conversations with the firm currently handling those services for us. They came to us early and let us know that they have a lot of districts reaching out to them requesting athletic trainer services, and they're having a very difficult time in finding staff available to perform those services. So they did let us know early on that, they'll have to, in order to be competitive and hire good staff, they will be asking for an increase, so that's what that's for. And then we also did have a decrease of $9,741. That's primarily due to NEASC fees that won't be required because we're going through that this year. So total increase for that line item of $11,759.
To my right, any questions on objects 323 or 331? Ms. Manella?
I have a question for Amy. Regarding the BCBA contracted services, this is in addition to the BCBA that you would like to hire?
So currently, last year, we had a full-time BCBA for our elementary school, and then we contracted out high school in the middle school. It was only 1 day a week for both schools. That's not enough. We were given a grant last year through the state for home relief. We're using that money. We increased our BCBA services this year. That grant money is going away, so that's why there's $50,000 for next year to keep what we have right now, because we increased it from 1 day a week to 3 days a week for our secondary schools.
Any additional
Okay,
questions?
thank you.
To my left, any questions? I just had one question following up on the BCBA. Is there a potential for savings if we hired directly on a part-time basis and then brought them up? Because right now it's contractual, right? So if they were a town employee, they'd be under a Board of Ed employee, they'd be non-certified.
I think it would be pretty challenging to try to hire a 0.5 or 0.6 BCBA. I don't know if there would be savings because the salary, depending on experience plus benefits, it would probably be more than 50,000.
Okay, and the only reason why I'm asking is it seems like we continue to increase this line item. So if we end up halfway through next school year and that half becomes 3/4, at some point,
At some point,
there's a watermark where it's more cost-effective.
absolutely. If we get to that point, then yes.
Okay.
I think that, and I want to be really clear with my answer. It's a little hard to explain. We were paying, the district was paying almost $50,000 for 1 day a week contract out of BCBA. I have found a different agency that is much less expensive, and we're going to get 3 days a week. So it's, we're gonna get more
Okay.
for less money. So it's a good move, but yes, if we do need to hire full-time, then I would add that increase next year. But next year, we're gonna get 3 days a week for $100,000. Because we're already, we're already paying $50,000
Yep.
for that contracted services. Does that make sense?
Yep. So at some point, there'll be a time where it's just not cost-effective, then we gotta talk about hiring someone.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. All right, to my right, any additional 323 or 331? To my left? No? Okay, we'll turn the page.
Okay.
Actually, I have one on 331.
We already turned the page. Go ahead.
With respect to the athletic trainer, looking at the object budget, Is it not correct that it's an increase of 43% for that?
Yeah.
So that 15,000 represents a 43% increase?
That sounds about right.
Yes.
And what was the basis for that?
So it's twofold. It's the rates have gone up because it's a tight market. So there's high demand, low availability of athletic trainers. So they're increasing their rates in order to attract staff. The second thing is it's more billable hours. I talked earlier about the COVID-19 return to play protocol. We have all these procedures now. If a kid has COVID, they have to go through a whole protocol before they can go back to practice. More hours. So we're seeing a big spike in that line item, and it is about 40%.
Thank you.
All right, turn the page.
Okay, under property services, the 400 purchase property services account, we are seeing an increase of 13,576. And those are various addition to maintenance contracts that we have within all our school buildings of 13,576. It's things for instance, the high school rooftop units of about 2,000, filter changes at GMS of about 2,000, at West Hill, the automated controls of about 7,200, and HVAC filters at West Hill as well for 2,400. Under water, we're anticipating approximately a 3% increase, and that's at the water usage at all our buildings. That does vary from year to year, depending on basically the spring and the fall as to how much water gets used. So that does vary depending on the school year. Under the repairs and maintenance 430 account, we are seeing an increase of 7,415. Again, that's including school building HVAC repairs, $6,500 increase. Science microscopes, repairs for those of 1,000, and then small $85 credit, for a total of 7,415. Under the rentals, we are seeing a $1,128 increase, and that's basically for the rental space at the Special Ed Pathways and Transition Program space on New Britain Avenue.
All right, to my left, any questions on object codes 400 through 440? And to my right. Turn the page.
Okay, the next section is our transportation line items. We do track our transportation just so we're able to take a look at it in a more detailed aspect. So I like to, while we do have variances within each of those accounts, I also look at it on a totality basis. So we'll go through the detail and then summarize it at the end. So the first one is the 510 account, and that's for our transportation regular in-district. That's all, the majority of our large buses that we run every day. And the contract that we have with New Britain Transportation calls for an annual increase of 3%. So that's what you see making up that increase in that line item. Transportation regular out of district, we're basically seeing that flat. And that sometimes has transportation required for some other things, such as the CREC schools. Within Rocky Hill, we're responsible for transporting Rocky Hill students to the CREC school. And then we also have some, homeless students students that come in and out of the district that we have to transport out. We typically will try to split that transportation with another district when we can. So that's why we see some slight changes there. And then we have the 515 Transportation Special Ed in-district. We are seeing an increase there of 14,676 for the 3% contractual increase. and then 53,598 for, other vehicles that are required for those students in district. And then to offset that, for transportation special ed out of district, we are seeing a decrease on an overall basis of 103,867. And again, these line items are more variable depending on what particular student needs are. So as they come in or out of district, that's why you see some of those swings.
Okay, objects 510 through 516, to my left, any questions? To my right, any questions? I have one question, just going back to 516, Chuck, so that savings is an assumption on what, one or two students aging out or no longer requiring out-of-district special ed transportation?
Yeah, and a lot depends on,
Some of it's route consolidation too, so
Yep.
So,
Amy, you want to speak to that?
yeah, so we have, and Ms. Herman and Ms. St. Pierre have been working, we've really established some relationships with a few schools, and we're working, we have to outplace students to go to those schools first, instead of having kids at all kinds of different
Yeah.
schools, so that allows us to save a little bit on transportation, and also have kids be kind of riding to school together, and not have like one kid here, one kid there, that kind of thing.
So
that's
fewer routes through that
fewer-
consolidation.
Fewer outplace.
Okay,
yeah, if
Keep
we
in
can
mind,
have,
those individual vans are very expensive on a
so I guess where I'm going, this is a pretty stable or practical savings.
at this point in
That's
time
it.
with the students that we have, that could
We
change.
could have someone move in tomorrow.
I know we always have that, yeah,
But yes,
This-
this is something that we're working on, and we're.
it's
trying-
realistic, this savings,
realistic.
okay.
And we are also still working on, obviously, bringing our students back into district when we can.
Yep.
Which that's also,
Okay, okay, but it's a big number, so.
Yeah.
In terms of the savings, okay. Any additional questions on that? Okay, turn the page.
And then some of the other accounts considered into the transportation recap are fuel, and that's seeing a significant increase. Typically, I will try to lock in that dollar value, but I am looking to get into a consortium, possibly with some other school districts, to see if that will help at all. But right now, it's very variable, but we'll see where it goes. So we do see a big increase there. And also, that takes into account the number of gallons that we use per year. So, we could see some fluctuation there as well. Then on a smaller dollar value is our field trip transportation account. That's showing an increase of $3,448. So on a summary, you'll see the summary below, based on the accounts we just reviewed, we are showing an increase on overall transportation of $79,335, with some of the additions, as well as some of the savings that we're seeing. We are showing an overall increase of 3.2%.
All right, objects 517, 519, to my right, any questions? To my left, any questions? All right, we'll turn the page.
This one is, again, same type of thing as our transportation, where we have various tuition accounts that we like to track separately, and then we summarize it at the end. So we do have tuition where students are placed in public school type of settings. We do carry a 4% tuition rate increase. That's resulting in $17,520. And then we have, again, students that go in and out of these programs. And right now, we are showing an increase of $45,105 based on the students that we anticipate being in that particular public school setting, for a total increase of $62,625. And then we track the tuition with special ed private placements. Again, we're showing a contractual increase of $9,360, and based on students' needs, anticipating $51,193 for a total of $60,553. We do partner with Middletown, who handles our adult ed program. Our costs, other districts share in those costs, but our portion is $33,429. We anticipate that remaining flat. And then magnet schools, we do have regular ed students attending magnet schools, and we are required to pay tuition when that happens. That account is showing an increase of $27,514. And some of that is the anticipated rate increase as well as some minor enrollment changes for a total of $27,514.
Right. To my left, objects 561, any questions? All right. Ms. Minella.
Chuck, I know in the past you've had a chart of the magnet schools and the numbers. Are you
Yes.
going to be doing that with enrollment numbers? I'm just curious as to
Yeah,
where
that-
the kids
if-
are placed.
We'll get to that a little bit later under the budget tab of transportation and magnet schools.
Okay,
You'll see that chart.
perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Any additional questions? Tuition, special ed, private, that 25% increase, how many students is that approximately now?
Private, it's tricky because we have a few kids aging out in the middle of the year next year. So we have two kids.
So that was part two of my questions. Is it kids coming out or kids coming in? If we can look at that and maybe next workshop talk about that.
In the next workshop.
Yeah, it's a big percentage. I'm just wondering, is it due to more kids coming in versus kids coming out, or the actual cost of the tuition?
What I believe it's due to is the last 2 years, our outplacement numbers were really, really low.
Yeah.
It was like really low, and it was a lot because of
COVID, yeah, sure.
And last year, after the budget process, we had outplaced like, I think, 4 kids.
Okay.
And that's what some of that is
Okay.
contributing. And it actually would be higher, but we do have 2 students aging out in the middle of the year next year, which is why it's not higher.
Okay, all right. Any additional questions? Okay, you can turn the page. 561, check.
Okay. Again, we do have, we are obligated to pay for tuition in regards to any students going to a VOAG program. I believe we have a couple students in that. And that tuition result is anticipated to be $7,100 or flat, the same as it is this year. So on an overall basis, we are seeing an increase in our tuition budget of $150,692, or a 14.4% increase.
Am I right? Any questions on VOAG? To my left. Okay, we'll turn the page.
We only have one in our other services account, and that's a lot of where our software resides. And so in that account, we are showing an increase of $24,137. 15,000 of that is related to our various curriculum softwares that we have. There's 3 in particular that we are seeing that, the district relies on heavily. iReady, iExcel, and Discovery programs. That's the bulk of what's causing that $15,000 increase. We are also budgeting for $6,449 costs associated with our copiers. And then athletic officials, timers, and proctors that, we pay to service our various sporting events. That's reflecting an increase of $2,163, and then a small $500 $525 increase for various other line items for a total of $24,137.
Right. To my right, any questions on 590? Ms. Manella?
The curriculum software, this is a question for Darlene. This is definitely gonna be a yearly subscription, so, correct, yearly?
What happened, we had some of our heavily regarded programs, like Chuck said, the iReady, the iExcel, our Discovery Pad. We came in with price quotes for next year with a very large increase just to maintain what we already have.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions to my right? To my left, any questions? No? All right, we'll turn the page.
The next page is some of our supply accounts, the first being 642, our library materials, and that account is reflecting a $6,750 increase. $2,450 is an increase on our Scholastic subscriptions at GMS. In there, we did also carry some iPads for teachers in that category of $3,950. Some digital library materials at GMS of $1,000, and then a small decrease in all the other line items within those categories of $650 for a total net increase of $6,750.
Chuck, did we miss the page?
Whoop.
Object
sorry.
611.
Yep, sorry about that.
We were making sure we were up, huh? We're all looking at each other like, what's he talking about?
My book, I must have taken them out and put them out of order. Sorry about that.
Playing games with us, Chuck, huh?
Keeping you on your toes.
Yes.
The 690 other supplies, I'll just finish out that page. We are seeing an increase of $4,400. A larger increase there is for marching band rain and winter coats at the high school of $3,560, and other various accounts within that category of $840 for a total increase of $4,400.
Okay. To my left, object code 642 and 690. Any questions? To my right, any questions? Ms. Manella?
I thought we had purchased the marching band uniforms, but that didn't, I guess that didn't include the coats?
Right. No, that was mainly, like you said, the uniforms themselves.
Okay. Aging myself up here. Remember?
And Chuck, just going back to library materials. iPads for the teachers at GMS, why does that fall under library materials versus one of the curriculum or instruction,
Right.
or even the tech line item?
My you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is it would be used in the, for the library purposes.
We had a few math teachers request to pilot to use the iPads. I think you've heard us talk in the past about how successful iPad use has been in math at the high school. So I think it showed up in the library materials because the thought was we'd purchase them, we'd place them in the library. Because it is a pilot, it's not necessarily assigned to a particular teacher, so that way, as we moved on, anybody could use it. But I will defer to you, you may recall something else.
No, that's it.
Is that, and just to, I guess, continue that question, is it better suited then to be in the tech budget or not? Because my preference is to keep these things consolidated
Yeah.
in one place versus having them in 5 or 6 different spots.
Right. Yeah, we can move that.
Can you look at it and
Yep.
just let us know?
Yep.
Okay, thank because Mr. Gavin wants room for more desktops.
I have issues.
All right, any additional questions on that? Yes, Mr. Gavin.
611 through 6.
We're going to do that now.
Oh,
Chuck's pages were out of order.
All right, I didn't know if we were going back, and I flipped
Yeah.
back, and then I missed the rain, winter, and
Yep.
All right, we're back. We're going backwards now. 611, Chuck. Here we go.
Okay. So instructional supplies, 611, that's showing an increase of 33,702. Of that, we are seeing requests for art supplies at the high school and GMS in the form of canvas, ceramics, and photography, totaling 5,241. The math, Desmos online materials, 19,200. That's at GMS. I do want to notate that there is an offset. It's not reflected on these sheets, but if you look at the object budget, you will see a $16,000 decrease in the textbook line item that offsets some of that increase. And then we have science, the NGS curriculum, mystery science packs for GMS, West Hill, and the high school of $4,057. Phys ed, various replacement items at GMS and West Hill of $1,829. Athletics at the high school and GMS of $1,500, and just some of the other smaller increases within this budget of $1,875 for a total increase of $33,702. Under the maintenance supplies, and that's our custodial and maintenance area, we are seeing an increase there of $12,200, and the bulk of that is basically supply cost increases that the vendors are telling us that we're going to see increases within all the various supplies that we use in that category. Gas, as Dr. Zito had mentioned in his slide presentation, we are seeing an increase of $75,087, just basically due to the supply increases that we are actually seeing now and we anticipate will continue. And the same for electricity. We are seeing an increase of $125,669, and that's primarily the rate increases that we are starting to see now and anticipate they will continue.
All right. We have objects 611 through 622. To my left, any questions?
I have one question. I think this came up last year in the budget discussions. For electricity, has it ever been looked into for solar panels and such that could reduce, now that we're seeing rates really climb again?
Yeah.
Has that ever been looked into?
Yeah, we have looked at that previously. Some of the things that we did encounter were the contracts that you look to enter into for those types of things. They're very, very long, over a long period of time, like 20 or 25 years. So it's just a little bit tough to try to anticipate what may happen in that time frame. And then you're responsible for, at that point, your roof may need to be replaced and things of that nature. So it just, in my point of view anyway, it's just tough to anticipate what's going to happen during that time frame and how you'd handle those types of changes.
If I can speak to that, I know 3 years ago now, Chuck, we moved forward on potentially doing a solar project at Stevens, and we sort of ran out of gas on it. But I think it does make sense to revisit it. I was thinking the same thing Ms. Tucker thought. In light of the increasing utility costs, there may be some value in revisiting this. One of the issues at that time was the roof projects. GMS, we had a roof project plan. Stevens, we did. Stevens is now done. It may make sense to bring it back to facilities. Maybe we can talk to the vendor and try to regroup on it.
Sure.
It's worth having the discussion. I absolutely think so.
The other thing, just to piggyback on that question.
They apply that. Ms. Manello just asked about potential grants, and typically the vendor does all that legwork as part of the proposal.
Yeah, the other, sorry, Jen.
I was just going to say that I think this would be the time to look at it too, because all the roofs are pretty new. So I think this would be the time, whereas you don't want to wait another 10, 15 years and then, it's one of those situations where we're going to have all this cost because we have to replace the roof and take it all off and everything.
Sure. And those programs are constantly changing, so it is good to revisit them and to see what kind of updates, they've come up with. The other thing that we do, the town, I don't know if you recall, but the town entered into agreement with a vendor, and they have a big solar farm. So that produces credits, and from the town's aspect, and some of those credits flow through to our school accounts as well. But sometimes it's tough to track because it varies a lot. And that's what makes budgeting in that line item a little tough at times, because you have to look at what the projected rate increases may be and also what credits you might be getting from the solar farm use. So, but I just wanted to make the board aware that we are in that, we do receive credit based on that program that the town entered into with that solar farm.
Any additional questions to my right? Ms. Manella?
Oh, I think
Oh,
you're not done.
well,
No, he's done.
You can go.
Okay, all right. Question for Darlene, the Desmos, is that the new math program that is starting at the middle school, the extra?
We actually implemented that several years ago. It was being purchased through the 641 textbook line item.
Okay.
This change is just a technicality because it is an online resource. It's not really a paper textbook. So there was a decision to move it to its appropriate category. So it's not really a true increase. As Chuck
Yeah,
said, it's
right.
offset by a decrease in the textbook line.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Gavin?
I think my question's relatively similar. So we have a curriculum software and the 590 other services. And then it looks like we've got the Math Desmos and some science software in the 611. Is there any reason we don't combine them into one, like one software group?
The Desmos is our actual math curriculum. That's our math curriculum as opposed to a supplemental software program such as iExcel, which provides supplemental help for students. It's not our curriculum resource. Think of Desmos as a textbook, and then you'll see the difference.
All right, I had two questions. Science, I know before we were talking about the microscope repairs, there's a potential that we're doing another version, our next step of the science lab upgrades at GMS. I guess, how old are the microscopes? And then if we're gonna do a science lab project, should we just buy new ones?
Sure.
So it's my understanding that the microscopes during COVID were not used as much as they had been in the past. So being in storage a little bit, the teachers were just looking to freshen some of those up a little bit, clean them up.
How old
Yes,
are
we
they?
absolutely could.
How old are the microscopes? I mean,
That, I don't know. We can look into that.
I'm just wondering if they're 20, 30 years old, if we're doing these new science
Sure.
classroom projects, maybe we should buy new microscopes. Mr. Maziarz is maybe nodding, maybe not.
I think he's asking you, Jay, if you used the same microscope when you were there.
Yeah.
I would say probably yes.
The last time it was renovated was
Yeah,
92, wasn't it?
I would have to guess yes.
Just, I don't know, are they any better now, are they not? But it's
can
worth
find out.
having the conversation. All right, any additional questions on 611 through 622? All right, moving on.
Okay, the last one is the 730 equipment line item, and in that account, we are seeing an increase of 24,534. And it's made up of some various items, one being the nurse office furniture at West Hill of 4,327. Also at West Hill, the mats and the carrier for those mats for this phys ed program of $4,671. Band instruments at Mosier for $1,750. Basketball shot clocks at the high school of $7,120, and that's my understanding that that's due to a CIAC rule change. And then various classroom furniture at GMS for $10,000, and then all other various equipment line items for a decrease of $3,334, netting to a total increase of $24,534.
All right, to my right, object 730, any questions? Ms. Manella?
But can you just go into detail about the CIAC rule change for the shot clock? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that, again, Mr. Horvath, or I don't know if John can, but speak to more detail, but
It's back in
that,
effect, right?
that is requiring,
It's a shot clock now.
Yeah, it's back in effect.
So
Oh.
you have, when you are on offense and you have possession of the basketball, you have X number of seconds to shoot.
Okay,
If you don't get the shot off and at least hit the rim before the buzzer goes, you lose possession of the ball.
They're reinstituting the shot.
They're
clock.
We don't.
So
Yeah.
There's no more, there's no more Dean Smith four corners offense.
we never had shot clock?
Mosier has them.
Came back.
Okay, sorry.
So
Yep.
sometimes basketball, when it's played without a shot clock, you could stall and hold the ball and pass it around forever.
Right.
This forces the kids to take a shot within a set time period.
Oh, we had them in the high school, that's why I was asking.
To my left, Mr. Gavin.
Are we getting a new scoreboard, or are we just putting shot clocks underneath the scoreboard, on the back of the hoops? What's the story there? Well,
Yeah, because the player has to be able to see it.
yeah, no, I was just wondering what
Yeah.
they were.
Oh, we have it.
I had the portable one time before.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just always assumed it was up there.
A lot of money
Rule
for a shot
changes.
clock.
Yeah,
Yeah, see, that's.
but the park and rec kids will get to use them too.
To my right.
No shot
Not
clock.
gonna, Sean's not gonna let him use it for parking. Ms. Rolfe?
Is the classroom furniture for GMS, is that due to the science classrooms being changed, or what is that?
no, my understanding it would be just the furniture in a lot of the classrooms is just aging out.
So just to follow up on Ms. Rolfe's question, I know we were carrying classroom furniture upgrades in the CIP, right? So
Right.
again, for consistency, we got to decide equipment or CIP. I know we made a larger commitment for grade level upgrades in the CIP, so I think that's just something for us to discuss. Whether or not it gets funded or not is a different story, but I think it's just where it belongs for consistency.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's something the board should take a look at. All right, any other questions on 7:30? All right, moving on, before we go on, any final questions on the global tab? Nope. All right, let's go into educational data.
So I
Dr.
went
Zito.
through these slides with you already. There are more in here, because I just pulled out the highlights. I'm not sure in the interest of time, we want to go through each of these slides again. You've been through it already in the fall with Ms. Listro. You just got another view. You've got the books. But if you have any questions on any of these slides, you can shoot me an email, and I'll get a response for you for Thursday. Or if you have any quick questions right now, I'm happy to dive into it. The big difference, just to highlight, is the pandemic recovery metric, where we fared very well. It's a new metric. The state really wanted to measure learning loss. And then, as we've been asked in the past, we've been asked to kind of compare ourselves to Durg A and Durg B, and we did that, a little bit of that this year. And I know the council has asked me those questions in the past as well. So, Mr. Dillon, you're calling the shots on the meeting here tonight, but I think if there's any questions, we can probably move beyond this.
No, I know we've all seen it twice. Ms. Listro presented it, we had it tonight, but wanted to give everyone a chance. Any
No, I don't have a question. All I want to say is I love that we put all this together. I know Darlene loves data as much as I do, and I hope that, again, you'll present this to the town council when you see them.
Absolutely show that. to
But
the
I
town.
really love the last page that you gave us as well, as if we spent the same amount as other towns did in Connecticut. So I think that one should be included when you present to the town council as
It's
well.
always included.
Okay. I just really like this. Yeah, 3 or 4 times. Present it 3 or 4 times.
Just that page.
We'll email it to them.
Overspend here.
Thank you,
the
Dr. Zia.
Happy to deal with that.
Send them, Chuck.
The
All right.
next
Anything,
tab is the NESDEC report.
I just want to make sure, nothing else on the educational data. Okay. Enrollment data, okay. Enrollment data,
You know,
Dr.
the
Zito.
highlight from this was, we've gone up 11 students this year. Very stable enrollment. The second highlight is the projected change over the next 3 years is a decrease of 25 kids. So again, those 2 talking points speak to the overall stability of the enrollment in the school district. So we're lucky from that standpoint, because if enrollment is increasing dramatically, it puts a lot of pressure on the budget. If it's decreasing sharply, it can result in reductions, but that creates issues as well in terms of who's losing positions, who's getting laid off, unemployment issues. So most school districts, you're probably in a good spot if your enrollment's stable. Happy to answer any questions you have on that tab.
Any questions on the enrollment data? I know we've seen this a few times as well over previous board meetings.
And to Ms. LaFredo's point, we share this with the town as well.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Comparative data, Dr. Zito.
So the comparative data, this is where we actually pull the information from the different towns. The state puts these reports together. So on the first page, you'll see that's DIRG-D, that's our district reference group. Just for everybody to have a common understanding, the state has reference groups A through H, and they're based on having what they call a similar economic profile. So ability to pay, family average median income per family in town and so forth. So these are the towns that the state has grouped with us, saying we basically have a similar economic situation in Rocky Hill. And as we pointed out earlier, we're 17th in spending on a per pupil basis out of the 24 towns in DIRG-D. Shelton did not report their data. I don't know why. So we don't know how we compare to them, but we're 17th in spending. And then you could see, what the C towns look like. A little bit more wealth in some of those towns. They're also smaller in some cases. You can see where their spending falls. If you turn the page, now we take a look at some state information here. And you can see where Rocky Hill ranks on the second page in terms of our ranking in the state on spending for the most recently available fiscal year is number 125 out of 166 districts. So we really are efficient with the dollars here. You could see that there was one district spending $52,000 per kid. There are a couple of tiny towns where it's very expensive to educate students. It's an economy of scale type issue. And the low district in the state was spending $15,600. The statewide average, to Ms. LaFredo's point earlier, was $21,000. We'd have to come up, almost $7 million to equal that amount, and that's the state average in Connecticut. So the average kid in Connecticut is costing $21,000. We're getting really good results for $18,690 per child here. And you can see on this chart too, our ranking has fallen back a little bit over the years. If you look historically down, say 20 years ago, we were ranked 72 in spending, but we're still continuing to get really good results. So I think it's just trying to be as efficient as possible with the dollars. Next page is the ANGLIC, which is essentially economic ranking of ability to pay. It's reflected on the previous page. You can see that our ANGLIC ranking is number 77. I talked about that on the slides earlier. So that puts us in the top 45% of wealth, but on spending we're down at the the 25th, bottom 75%, basically, 25th percentile in spending. So I talked about that earlier in the slides, but that's where we get this information from. And again, we're kind of right in the middle of the state in terms of wealth. Flip the page, it's just another representation of those numbers, where we are on per pupil spending, where we rank on Anglic and so forth. We talked earlier, next page, about special education. We were the most efficient district in the district reference group in DIRG D. You see, in terms of efficiency statewide, we ranked 20th. About 19% of our budget is spent on special education. Sharon spending 10% of their budget, but it's a very tiny district. And you can see districts going all the way up towards the back of this report, up to a third of their budget is special education. So I think it's good where we are. We're efficient. Our transportation costs also, to some of the questions that Amy was answering earlier, have remained very efficient, only 2.9% of the budget. So overall, in terms of special ed spending, I think the kids are getting the services they need. I do feel like the increase in enrollment is driven to some extent by the attractiveness of the programs we offer here. You see families moving into town and accessing those programs. I'm happy to answer any questions you have on any of this kind of comparative state data.
Right, to my left, any questions on the comparative data? To my right, any questions? Ms. Morphew?
I have a question. Is our low spending keeping us from the scores going up or anything? Is this holding us back in any way?
I don't think so.
Are we lacking somewhere?
We're scoring very well, very competitive, even with the wealthier towns. I don't feel, but this is my personal view, I don't feel throwing dollars at educational systems necessarily results in higher test scores. There are districts that spend a lot more money than we do, and they get very bad results. So I'm not sure there's a direct correlation. So I'm comfortable with the spending. I think the kids get what they need here. I think we're just very efficient with the dollars in Rocky Hill.
Great.
And I think that's a good thing, to be fiscally conservative and be efficient. Our salaries are competitive, so it's not as if, we're underpaying staff here. It's a competitive salary schedule virtually for every position across the district. So it's not that. I think it's just a function of being efficient. I think we're a little light administratively, but we make it work here. We all wear a lot of hats, and that's okay. Just being candid, I'm answering the question. You can go to similar towns like Berlin, where there's an assistant principal in every single elementary school. We don't have that here. That's one of the reasons why our dollars are reflected at a little bit lower level in terms of the PPE, but we make it work.
I feel nervous with all the people sitting behind looking at it.
They know this already. I mean, we like working here. I'll speak for the team. You guys are very supportive, and we take pride in the fact that, we do well given the limited resources and being very efficient.
Okay,
Absolutely.
great, thank you.
Mr. Gavin?
I have a quick question along those lines. As far as with special ed, I know that we've brought a lot of the education locally here. Is there an investment that we could make in the local, our town special ed program that would alleviate some of the transportation expenses and some of the other expenses that are incurred? Or is that,
We
am I opening a
had
can of worms?
many more students outplaced before Ms. Stevenson came. There was a change in philosophy. So
I think you can come to the next upcoming special ed subcommittee meeting, and there's going to be some more ideas about program expansion.
Thank you
but,
very much.
I mean, and if you want to add to that,
Yeah.
I'm not sure there's a lot more to be saved.
When I came here, we had it's outplaced, now we have 10, so it's been significantly reduced. I don't think we can, we're always trying, but I don't know that we can reduce it any further because, we have 10 kids, there's 10 that are outplaced. Those 10 are.
It'd be hard to bring that in.
Those are expensive, so an outplacement typically could run $150,000 to $200,000 for tuition and transportation. So, that's why it makes sense. That's why we opened the Dream Academy.
Correct.
And it makes sense to have those kids in district. So to Amy's point, we're always looking at the possibility of those families returning those kids to town. But in some cases, the best placement for a child is an outplacement. And again, those are very individualized, and obviously I'm not going to get into individual students here, but the fact that we've gone from roughly 20 down to 10 shows that in some cases, families have elected to choose in-district programming. And in some cases, kids are in district for X number of years, and then they reach a point where the family meets with the team and they really push for an outplacement for whatever reason, and that sometimes is a decision that's made. Again, we try to do everything that's in the best interest of the individual child.
Well, and also, I know I always say this, but I'll say it one more time, Sean. When I came here, all of our students that were in our transition program, 18 to 22, were being outplaced. There were only 3. Next year, there's gonna be 14. So that right there, if we hadn't created that program, the addition to the budget would be so much higher.
No, that's why I asked the question,
Yeah.
but
And-
I'll show up at the next meeting.
But I think part of it is making sure that we have seats in the future for those kids, because now we're nearing capacity. So we created a program, now we're at capacity, now we have to talk about potentially opening
So
up.
we had
more
a
seats.
scheduled meeting right before the holidays that we had to move for special education. And the topic that evening, well, it's because you have a grandson now, and that's okay. Mr. Dillon was very kind to move the meeting. But the topic for that meeting that Steve is going to run is to really look at expansion of the Dream Academy. That's the topic, because we're running out of space. So, come to that meeting. We'll get it on the books with Mr. Dillon, Mr. Slattery, and we'll invite everybody, and it's going to be an important meeting.
Okay, I'm going to entertain a motion for a 5-minute recess, but before we do, I think Ms. Morphia has something for Ms. Stevenson.
All right.
Oh, that's nice.
Perfect timing with that comment.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah, that was-
exactly.
I want to ask a quick question.
little.
Yeah, that's fine. Huh? Yeah. No special ed. Oh.
If mom and dad say no, call grandma.
Ah,
That's a
nice.
good one.
Oh, these are great. Please pass me to grandma.
Oh,
That one's
nice.
Please pass me to grandma.
Oh, this one's good. I can't wait to give these to my daughter. I laugh in the face of naps. Oh, little man. Oh, these are
So
cute.
cute.
Thank you.
Oh,
You made
nice.
those too?
What was that?
Did you make these?
I did.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Cute.
With that, I will entertain a motion for a 5-minute recess.
For a 5-minute recess?
Motion from Mr. Slattery, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Tucker, all those in favor?
Aye.
5-minute recess. and move on to the budget object. I guess, Chuck, are we with you at this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in this tab, we just, a lot of this we've gone through highlighting the increases within these object reports. But the first one is the object summary. And that summarizes the accounts through, like it says, the object. And then the next one is the object detail report. And basically that breaks down within each object code, all the detail. So just to
I'm just
depict
gonna
that-
step back 1 second,
Sure.
Chuck, just to go through this section by section, okay? All right, so object summary, page 1. We'll do it that way, just
Okay.
so if there's any, I see some people got things highlighted in
Yep.
notes. All right, page 1 summary, any questions? Am I right? Left. No, I just had one question. The 32,000 for, I guess, substitute teachers, and that's the non-permanent building subs. Is that enough reflective of the increases that, right? We upped the daily rate, right, 2 years ago, Mark?
Yes.
And you're comfortable with the 32,000?
Yeah, that's actually for, we don't have a lot of them, but that dollar is for sub-paras.
Oh, just sub-paras,
Yeah.
okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. All right. All right, any other questions before we turn the page? All right, page 2, object summary, any questions to my left? Any to my right? All right, got some beautiful GMS artwork on the next page. And now we go into the detail. All right, Chuck.
Yeah, so this report is naturally a lot longer, just because within each object code, like the 111 is the certified salary line item that we saw on the previous page where it was one line. This is all the detail behind that summary. So the only thing I would caution the board, not caution, but make you aware, that you may see a lot of fluctuations in the detail, especially from a salary standpoint, because staff moves in and out of these various, they may move from one school to another. We may have retirements or people leaving and replacements coming in. So, when those, we have people go out on maternity leaves. So there's a lot of variations that could affect the detail. And that's why when we go through the summary, we detail and point out, what's making up those differences. If you try to get into the detail and ask questions, there are answers behind it, but there's a lot of movement, so it's harder to explain. I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
But that's why you're here, right? All right. Page 1. Any questions on the object details? Page 1. To my right, any questions? To my left. All right, Chuck, I had one, world language, high school. Maybe this is for Darlene, the $57,000 reduction. Is that just because of split time, or?
Yeah, again, so which one was that, Brian?
World language, high school, is a $57,000 reduction?
Okay, so that is 10-111-01. So I'll go into the detail, and then again, there's more detail that I typically, that I have. It's quite lengthy, so I don't print it out for, the books per se. But that's get actually into staff members. So from an FTE standpoint, there is a 0.5 reduction. But again, if you look at it on an overall basis, so if you go into the staffing tab, you go and look on a world language, we have 11.4 and 11.4, so there's no FTE increase. So that to me, means that there was staffing changes within that line item. Someone retired and we got a replacement or something of that nature.
It's not, but it's 50,000. It should be
No, but there's also a corresponding increase at GMS of 32K.
Right.
being
So
shared.
there's some
Yeah.
shared staff between those two schools, so that's probably what accounts for those numbers sticking out like that, but we can clarify that for Thursday night.
Okay. All right.
We're on this page, if I may. I might be able to pick off some of Ms. Manella's questions instead of
Please.
jumping back to it, if that's okay, Mr. Dillon.
Yes, yep.
So she had asked about the 121,000 on this page, which is the salary improvement, instructional certified. And that 121 increase, that includes the district-wide technology support teacher that was grant funded, so that's about 111,000 of that. And then contractual raises for the other personnel assigned to that line item. That's the first question Ms. Manella had, was the 121. Does everybody see what I'm pointing to?
No, they don't have these.
No, they don't have, but they have the sheet in front of them.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, it's got the 121.
Have the
Yep.
sheet. The special ed, there was a question about a $158,000 increase, which is.
That's page 3.
We'll get to that when we get to page 3.
Yep.
Yeah, it is on page 3. And then the Mosier 172 was also on page 3 or 4. So just wanted, while we were on page 1, I wanted to answer that question.
So is that a new position, the district-wide?
No, it was a grant-funded position. And it was fully funded through the ESSER grant from the
Yep.
federal government for the last
Yep.
2 years. It's been a very valuable position. We had eliminated that position when we opened Mosier,
Right.
and we were able to reinstate it with the federal grant, and we'd like to keep it.
So that's only for one position?
It's one position,
Okay.
yeah. Well, it's the increase is the one position.
Yep.
$111,000. The other $10,000 is contractual raises spread among
Yep.
the 466,000 in salaries. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
All right, we're on page 1 still. Any questions on page 1? Left,
I got a question.
to my right? Nancy?
I'm just curious, the two art positions, high school, GMS and West Hill, were those new staff that were hired at a lower step, or is that why the decrease?
So West Hill is definitely a new staff member.
Okay.
and Significantly lower staff.
Yep.
Change in GMS, maybe you can refer to that, Chuck.
That's probably it, too.
Because there's no new staffing in GMS.
$16,000 reduction.
That's where we did budget and anticipated retirement, not necessarily one that we're not going to fill, but just that we'd have a retirement.
change. Yep.
And they'd be coming in as a,
Okay.
Yep, that's what I thought.
Any additional questions? Page 1, to my right and to my left? No? Okay, page 2. Any questions? Object report, page 2. To my left?
So,
Mr. Gavin, of course, please.
so that's just, that 16,000 is someone we're expecting to retire and then rehire at a lower level.
Yep.
yeah, I mean, it's a question mark,
Yeah.
but we
Yeah,
did budget
that's-
retirement and bringing in a new teacher in that position.
All right, we're on page 2. To my left, any questions on page 2? To my right, any questions on page 2?
The $24,000 decrease in math at the high school on this page. New staff member coming in for
For retire.
I would think maybe that's probably all the decreases, the same,
That's, yeah, I was gonna.
same situation.
Not necessarily, but in many cases, yes.
Yeah, it could be moving from one building to another or something.
Oh,
of that
yeah,
nature,
that's
too.
true, yep.
All right, page 3, I know Dr. Zito wanted to talk about the
So there was a
158 and the
question,
172.
158,000, so that actually is the full salary for the life skills teacher, which is a little over 100,000, and then the contractual raises for all the other employees assigned to that line item. So, but that full position goes in there. And then there was also a question about Mosher, the 172,000, and that's one teacher in special ed who was previously assigned to the IDEA grant, and another special education teacher who was in a different line item because it was a regular ed position previously. We didn't fill the retirement, but we assigned a special ed teacher to that line item, so essentially reflects a couple of positions there.
Okay, page,
We're gonna answer these the best we can, but I don't wanna get too deep into the weeds on someone, because people are gonna figure out, oh, he's talking about this
No,
person.
yeah, no, yeah,
Trying to
absolutely.
give you general
Yep.
responses here.
Any questions on page 3? To my left, page 3. All right, moving on to page 4. Any questions to my left on page 4?
So there's two,
Yes.
student supports, are those the new positions that were funded by the grants?
What number are we looking at?
I'm sorry.
We're on page 4. What line item is that,
The
Am?
student support,
The last
the,
one.
the bottom 3.
Student support
Oh, it
certified?
looks like it was new, never mind, I was off a line, I was off a column,
You're all set?
I'm good, never mind.
Okay. To my right, any questions on page 4? No? All right, moving on to page 5. Any questions on page 5? To my right? To my left, any questions on page 5? No. All right. Page 6. Any questions? Page 6? Looking right. Any questions?
You will see on page 6, the OT position I talked about in the opening slides. That was previously grant funded, that's
70,000.
$70,000. That does jump out.
All right, page 7, any questions? To my left? All right, any questions on page
Question,
7?
From Ms. Manella on the $50,000 increase for support for West Hill. We did look at that one today too, and I can answer that one now.
Yeah, sure.
It's not a new position, but it's reflecting costs for multiple part-time tutors, math, EL, literacy. Darlene, Paige, and Mary oversee a bunch of part-time tutors. And we had a wage increase in terms of their hourly wages, district-wide for our math and literacy tutors to be more competitive. And we also had what was called a federal immigrant grant. That grant expired, so those positions are now reflected in the operating budget.
And that's just, that comment sort of,
Yep.
I guess, calls this out a little more, Dr. Zito, because
Yeah.
when we talk about student support resources, which you're saying are
Right.
tutors, when we look at the proposal for GMS, Stevens,
Right?
as
because-
compared to West Hill, and then the number for Mosher.
But those are increases. Doesn't mean we're not staffing those other.
Well, yeah, but I'm looking at the adopted and your proposed numbers. Look at, that's, wow.
EL students and so forth. We can dig a little bit more into that, but
Sometimes what happens also is some of the schools are Title I, Title II, Title III schools. So some of those support positions are contained in the grants.
they're not going to be reflected in the operating budget. So West
Right.
Hill's not a Title I school.
So I think we should let's plan on revisiting that next budget, to
Do you
break down it.
understand What Chuck just said about
Yep, yeah,
Title I
Yep.
grants aren't going to be reflected in the operating budget.
correct,
So
correct.
West Hill support typically isn't going to be funded
Yep.
federally. but we'll get you more detail on that for next.
But then we can equalize it when we look at both, right?
Yep.
The grant
We-
subsidies versus the budget.
That should be equalizing the services, correct?
No, but I mean, the budget can be trued up based on grant funding versus budget operating expenses, right? When you put the two together, that will be
Yeah.
the number.
Correct.
Okay. All right, page 8. Any questions on page 8? To my left. To my right, any questions on page 8? None? Oh, Mr.
See the increases in special ed paras. I mean, I think that's what we discussed. I mean, is that just based on kind of the grant, the positions that we're losing from the grant and are being built into the budget? Is that a fair assumption?
Which number are you looking at specifically?
113, 1201 through 05. So like increases of 78,000, 52,000, 61,000. Is that all just because our special ed numbers have gone up and that extra support is needed?
I think this was the para funding, right? So these are the paras, right? Wasn't this all part of the ESSER grant originally, right?
Yeah, a lot of them are, and then
Now they're part
some,
of the
a
budget.
lot with the paras also, they, depending on, they move maybe from one building to another, like you'll see a big decrease at the behavior program, West Hill. So sometimes, they move
Shift it
within
around or something?
buildings and
Well, sometimes they
accounts.
follow the kids, so they're aging out of one school and going to another school and so forth. So, a lot of movement. We can, if you want to get into more detail on that, we can get into that with more detail.
No, I think that makes sense.
Anything else? Page 8? No? All right, moving on, page 9. Like a whole lot of zeros. Yeah. That's an easy one. All right. Any questions, Sean? Page
You know my question.
10. Page 10. Questions on page 10. To my right, any questions? This is mostly insurance stuff.
It's not a question, but Jay lost his bet.
Oh,
The what?
I was gonna remind him of that also.
he's leaving. He's out of here.
Just called it.
All right, to my left, any questions? No? All right, page 11, any questions?
Oh, I had a question.
On 11 or 10?
11, page
11, Ms. Manella's got a question, yes.
I think I had sent Dr. Zito a quick question regarding the tuition reimbursement.
Yes. So that's the 17,500. So we have, the teachers are, their contract calls for an increase in the overall pot of $5,000 on their baseline amount. And then we have a number of administrators in doctoral programs. And the board did make some adjustments last year in some of the non-union administrator contracts.
Okay.
We're getting a little bit more on tuition reimbursement, so about 12,000 of that is going towards like doctoral coursework and so forth. I look at all the work they're doing, and I'm glad I did all that 10 years ago. More writing papers for me.
All right, any more questions on page 11? To my left, to my right? No? All right, page 12. Any questions on page 12? Left question? Right? No. All right, page 13. Any questions on page 13? Not a lot of line items here either. Thoughts? Left, right? No. All right, page 14, moving on. Any questions on page 14? To my right, any questions? To my left? All right, page 15, any questions? Not a lot of line items here that are being impacted. To my right, any questions? To my left? No. All right, page 16, moving on. Repairs and maintenance, we got here, and some transportation. Any questions to my left? Page 16. Mr. Gavin's getting ready. Page 16 to my right. Any questions? No?
I'll tell you later.
All right, moving on, page 17. Again, this was transportation, field trip stuff. I think we went over most of this. Any questions to my left on page 17? To my right? No. Oh, Ms. Manella, go ahead.
The fuel, Chuck, remember a couple of years ago, didn't we have with the other, it was another bus company that we were working with? And I thought, wasn't there a contract with the fuel or something like that at that point?
No,
No?
way
Yeah.
back.
Yeah?
There used to be. But, you know, we purchase all the fuel now.
Yeah, we've been doing that for some
Okay.
time, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, moving on, page 18. Any questions? This is tuition, some admin.
We went through that, I think.
Yep, tuition, mileage. Any questions to my left? To my right? No. All right. Page 19, not a lot here. This is some admin mileage and other things.
15,000.
We're on 18 still or no?
We're on 19 now, Mr. Gavin. Did you have a question on 18? We'd certainly go back for you.
I watched is that telephones? For $137,000?
Oh, jeez.
Oh,
What's that?
Yeah,
Communications.
Page 18.
decrease.
Yep.
Decrease.
went down by 3,000.
That's good.
Yeah, that's various telephone services. Cell phones, all our internet connections, the cables connecting, the infrastructure connecting all the schools.
The internet makes, yeah, that makes much more sense.
All right. Page 19, moving on to page 19. I think Mr. Slattery just mentioned other services, improvement instruction. I think that's you, Ms. Listro, the $15,000 increase, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's the curriculum software we talked about.
Okay. IXL and all that,
Ready.
iReady.
Any additional questions on page 19 to my right and to my left? No? All right, page 20, instructional supplies. Looks pretty lean in terms of changes. Any questions to my left? To my right, any questions? All right. Going on to page 21, continuing with instructional supplies. I guess GMS is the big one, so,
Yeah, I had started that, but I think you addressed that earlier. That's offset by textbooks
Yep.
in 641, I
On
think.
page 24, you'll
Yep.
see the offset.
okay. Any other questions on page 21 to my right? To my left? All right. Page 22, continuing with instructional supplies. Any questions to the right? Left? No questions. All right. Page 23. Not a lot here as well. To my left, any questions? Again, instructional supplies, custodial maintenance. No one with nothing to my left. To my right, any questions? Okay. Page 24, I know Ms. Listro talked about the offset, and then we have textbooks and utilities here. I know we had a pretty in-depth conversation about utilities. Ms. Manella's got a question, I believe.
Yeah, I know I had sent an email to Dr. Zito last night regarding this line item, the electricity line. So in regards to the newer schools like Mosier and Rocky Hill High School, with LED lighting and all that, so are we not seeing any kind of savings with,
So the LED lights have been installed for a while,
yeah,
so we did see some savings. But as the rates go up,
It's all driven by
regardless
the
of the
increase.
infrastructure, it's not like we're installing them next year and we can project savings.
yeah,
So it's really driven by the utility cost spike. So it's a good thing we have them. The board made a good decision to put them in,
right,
but we can't control the cost of those commodities moving forward.
okay,
Make sense?
yeah. Thank you.
All right, to my right, any additional questions on utilities textbooks? No, to my left? All right, page 25, moving on, not a lot here to library materials. To my left, any questions? And to my right, any questions? No, okay. 26, other supplies, admin expenses. To my right, any questions? And to my left. All right. Page 27, other supplies, continuing through, not a lot here as well. Any questions to my left? And to my right. Pretty lean, Dr. Zito, pretty lean. All right, page 28, we have equipment to my left. Any questions on equipment? To my right, any questions about equipment? None? All right, moving on to 29, we have custodial equipment, dues and fees. Any questions on page 29? To my left, any questions? My right, any questions? All right, page 30, dues, fees, custodial. Any questions to my left? Any questions to my right? None. Final, page 31, custodial uniforms. None. All right. I think that puts us at a pretty good place to stop. Yes, Ms. Tucker?
Can I ask a question on page 24?
You absolutely can.
The utilities electricity for, is that Stevens, only went up 4% versus the other ones went up pretty, not even 1%. Why wouldn't Stevens electricity go up?
I mean, I try to take a look at both the usage and the rate increase. So when I did that, you know, the usage looked like it was probably trending down. I'd have to look at my worksheet, but that's what I would anticipate.
Now, we also have the questions that we responded
Yeah, I'm gonna-
to. Do you want to?
Yeah.
Because a lot of them relate directly to the pages we just.
Yeah, I'm going to have you hand that out and summarize that. Before we adjourn tonight, I think the last thing worth doing is there were some questions from board members. A lot of them have been answered. Dr. Zito does have responses to all the questions, but I'm going to have him briefly go through this and summarize anything else that is relevant worth talking about tonight.
Thank you.
And just to show of hands, does everyone think this is a good
Thank you.
spot to stop in the book tonight?
Yeah. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Thank you, sir.
Jeff, we have one or two more, maybe? What we tried to do was refer to the program and object detail numbers and so forth to make it a little bit easier for you, but we already talked about the first question. And I want to thank Ms. Manella because she did her homework and sent us a lot of questions here. We talked about the $121,000 difference, the 158, the 172. I think we've addressed that one already, and you've got the answers in front of you. The second question was about the OT position at Mosier. Can it be, shared with West Hill and Stevens? And really, it's a district-wide position. It was funded by the ESSER grant, so for accounting purposes, it's assigned to a school line item, but OT is, for the most part, shared by a couple of people throughout the district. In terms of question 3, same kind of thing. We have primary assignments for our IT staff. This was a grant-funded position, but in speaking with Chris today, just to confirm with him, the staff member assigned to the position at Mosier also has other needs that individual has to deal with throughout the district. So, you know, a lot of times you'll see that from an accounting standpoint, we'll assign a person to a specific site. But, you know, unlike a West Hill classroom teacher who we know is at West Hill every day, the concept of sharing does come out quite a bit with IT staff and so forth. West Hill support, that's the one you wanted some more detail on. That's the $50,000, number 4. So we'll come back with detail on the tutoring pieces. Moving along to question 5, there's a general percentage increase with paraeducators. Enrollment hasn't increased, therefore why the increase in hiring paraeducators? And as I talked about earlier, the enrollment's been stable, only 11 students increase total from last year for the whole school district. But we saw an 8% increase in special needs kids. That's 30 more kids in the last year. Many of them are new to Rocky Hill. Frequently, they'll come in, Amy, you call me frequently and say, we just had a student move in whose IEP calls for para support, and it's a legal mandate. So that's why you see the increase in paraeducators, which is, you know, that's very closely tracking the increase in special ed enrollment overall. We talked about group medical already. I think, you know, the market rate is about 12 to 14%. We've made some adjustments which have allowed us to come in at 5.8. So that's question 6. Question 7, we talked about the tuition reimbursement already. Question 8, I think we got deeply into transportation, so we've covered that. You have our answer in front of you. Number 9, and I do appreciate that question because most school buses historically have been using diesel fuel, but New Britain Transportation does use gasoline-powered vehicles in their fleet. And those costs are just reflective of what's going on right now nationally with gas prices. We talked about the tuition increases for special ed, public and private. I think we dealt with the GMS math question already with Desmos. 12, we've already talked about the utilities in great length. 13, West Hill is asking for some equipment for the nurse's office and mats. We covered that in the global, but also Stevens has some new office furniture coming in. Stevens and Mosier also have some new music equipment coming in. 14 was a question about the program budget for special education, which is up about 9%. And then Maria also asked about the FTE. It's 121 FTE. Does it include Bright Beginnings? Yes. The Bright Beginnings staff is included in that special education program. Are para-educators included? Yes. There's about 63 paras that are built into that 121 overall staffing FTE figure for special education. Special education clerical staff, was that an increase? That was a really good question. Technically not a new position. We had a clerical position that remained vacant and unfilled, and we removed it from last year's budget because we had a lack of quality candidates. However, when we restructured the special education and HR departments, as you all know, and we did fill that position in the spring of 2022. So technically wasn't in the budget last year because we didn't have good candidates, so we took it out. But it's now reflected as an increase, if that makes sense. Basically, the new, when you look at that entire department, we have an HR coordinator that we didn't have before, and that's Gina. I think most of you know who she is, does a great job. Please provide an explanation of pupil services for special education object 323. I think we talked about this already. Those are the costs that are associated with the independent evaluations, the consulting fees, sometimes outside consultants working with kids based on IEP requirements, related services for some of the magnet students, and then we talked at length tonight about the BCBA. The athletic, I think, Steve, you already asked this question as well, the 42% increase. Again, we talked at length about the staffing shortages and the additional protocols such as return to play, all that paperwork that has to be filed with a physician's office, reviewed, returned, interacting with a school nurse. None of that stuff existed prior to COVID-19, so that's all extra stuff on the athletic department. And then the ESY, really good question too. Why is it up 41%? We actually had, it's not a large number to run ESY, but last year we had a federal grant, they kept throwing some of these small grants at the districts too, and that covered a good portion of the staffing for last summer's ESY program, which is in the current fiscal budget, because it starts on July 1. We don't anticipate getting those funds again, hence the increase. So that grant is also not going to be there for us. But those kids who qualify for extended school year are getting them. It's a legal mandate to provide those services. I do really appreciate the time and attention you took, Ms. Manella, to send those questions to us.
I think what would be helpful, I don't know, if Chuck, you can throw it on a spreadsheet or something of like all of the COVID grants, like the dollar amounts, just to show like how much money we're actually losing.
Did you get a copy of the slides from Christine?
But some of them are, they were 2-year grants, so.
So you want to see that, so the overall amount going away was $685,000.
So it doesn't show.
Okay,
Just,
oh,
you want to see, you want that broken down by the individual grant amounts?
no, you just said 685
Yeah,
is what we're
that's the
losing.
amount
Okay.
disappearing on June 30th.
Okay.
And what we're trying to do is hold on to about $580,000 in staffing,
Okay.
and then we made those other adjustments, reducing substitutes, strategically looking at some retirements and not filling them due to attrition.
Yep.
We're trying to bring that number down to 479.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, so to wrap up tonight, I think the plan will be, if anyone has any additional questions regarding the budget book, if you can please get those to Dr. Zito. I think you'll make best efforts, but we are meeting Thursday, so we're not sure if you can answer all of them. But we'll open tomorrow, Thursday's meeting with the open items from tonight. Dr. Zito and his team will present their answers to those. We'll continue on through the budget book, and then we'll discuss the next steps. So thank you for all your efforts so far, and we're about halfway there. All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion
Second.
from Mr. Sliders, is there a second? Ms. Manella, all those in favor signify by say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Meeting